We do have quorum, Chris. I just want to let you know. And Ellen.
Is our new co-chair hiding behind a turned off camera right now? Is that what's happening? She might be busy. I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. Looks like we're filling out. We may want to do some introductions and give Ellen a chance to get back in front of the screen.
Let me know when you're ready to do roll call, and I'm happy to help.
I think we're ready.
Okay. Matthew.
Present.
Melissa.
Present.
Was that Issa? Because if so, I'm present.
I said Melissa before that. I'm sorry if it sounded like Issa.
I'm present,
Okay.
Melissa.
Thank you. Ellen?
As Director Bass, I think one of the questions that folks had is, even though there's the goal of maintaining this program, sometimes the staff or the funding that goes through CHDP actually helps to support the staff in some of those programs as well.
I'm going to mute some folks there for a second. Let's see who's next. Louis.
As we have proposed in, related to the healthcare, the foster care, that will be maintained. And so I think, I recognize that some of the CHDP.
Lynn, did I hear you say you're present?
I'm present.
Okay. LaShante.
I'm present.
Dr. Walker.
Present.
Any other specific questions?
Jeff.
Present.
We have Michael here. We don't see him on yet. Tamisha. Don't see you on yet. Shayla's not here today. Stephanie?
Here.
Ronell? I don't see him on yet. And then Cheryl?
Yes.
Okay. We do have quorum. If other folks want to introduce themselves in chat, that'd be great as well. Oh, and Tamisha, I just see you signed on.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. Another call for co-chairs to co-chair the meeting.
Christopher, was Tamisha going to start, or did you want me to start?
I think it makes sense for you to start. These are at least at the beginning. There's some of the easier lift, right? You know, you're new and you're getting your feet wet, so I think it's easier to sort of take us through.
All right. Well, you all will train me. So here goes. Great. We'd like to now take public comment on any item under the jurisdiction of the Racial Justice Oversight Body and not on this agenda. So I think I see some hands raised. Just scrolling through, give me a second. I see one hand raised. Doug Leach.
Yes, thank you, Ellen.
at the last quarterly meeting of the Racial Oversight Body in November, I spoke up and asked the RJOB to follow up with the Board of Supervisors so that some action could be taken on the recommendation of the RJOB from your August meeting to go forward with recommendations for a sheriff oversight body in Contra Costa County. The discussion at that meeting, in your meeting in November, included the information that this recommendation had been received by the county staff, but that the recommendation had to go through the Public Protection Committee first before going to the Board of Supervisors. And the Public Protection Committee, I believe, has met only once since the last, since November. They met in December, and it wasn't on the agenda for that Public Protection Committee meeting. So I just want to bring this up again and ask for the RJOB to follow up on that and make sure that this request is responded to. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. I see another hand from Jane Current.
Yes, thank you. I haven't attended as many of your meetings as Doug Leach has, but I have followed the development of this whole task force and this year's oversight board, and I would concur with what Doug has said. Just would really like to see this move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Anyone else on public comment? I'm scrolling through and I don't see any other hands raised. Going once, going twice. All right, thank you, Nicole. Just put the agenda packet in the chat if you all need it. And I realized we did introductions, but I skipped offering folks a chance to make any announcements. So if anyone has announcements at this time, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you to make announcements. All right, not seeing anyone for announcements. So in the agenda packet should be the record of action from our last meeting, our November 4th, 2021 quarterly meeting. So if you could all review it and let me know if anyone has corrections or modifications or additions. Quiet group, not seeing anyone. Does anybody have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes from our last meeting, Ellen.
Great, thank you, Isa. Anyone else?
I second.
I saw a second from Lynn, motion from Isa. Christopher, do you want me to take the vote or do you want to go around?
I can do that for you, Ellen.
That would be great. Thank you, Nicole.
Alyssa?
Aye.
Isa?
Yep.
Ellen?
Yes.
P.A. Becton?
Aye.
Louis?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
LaShante?
Yes.
Dr. Walker?
Yes.
Everybody's.
Tamisha Walker?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Stephanie?
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yes, ma'am.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Great, thank you all. And our next item is discussing the scheduling of the Racial Justice Oversight Body quarterly meetings, and then we'll vote on what the schedule will be. So Christopher, will you be presenting on this?
I was just going to ask if there was any additional context. I think this was something that ORJ recommended that we put on the agenda. So I didn't know if there was any specific context about attendance or anything like that we needed to discuss, or this is just continuing sort of a practice we've had the last couple of years of, you know, checking to make sure that this is still the right time for everyone and that everyone's going to be able to attend.
Yeah, that's right. There's no specific presentation on this piece, but just to get feedback from the body in terms of whether or not you want to maintain the quarterly schedule, if there's a specific date of the month in which you would like this meeting to continue forward, if this particular time frame works for everyone, and if so, we can begin charting that out for the remainder of the year.
If anyone has any discussion, for me, this time works, but I'd be good to hear from others if they have any proposal for changing this, or if this time of the afternoon and day of the week work for folks.
You got a couple of hands raised there.
Oh, great. Cheryl?
Frankly, I think that I know I can't speak for anybody else. I can only speak for myself. And I arrange my calendar at the beginning of the year based on when these meetings are to occur. And the time and the date, because they're set quarterly, right? And I think they're preset on a time. So for me, this is what I do. And so if we're gonna change it, then I need to know, because they're set 3 months in advance, and they're set on a time, and they're set, and I arrange everything else, work, my physical therapy, and everything else based on this time and this. And I told you guys that before, because I go to physical therapy right after this time. So if you're going to shift it back, or you're going to shift it, I need to know, because my schedule is based around this meeting. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Appreciate it. Jeff?
Thanks, Ellen. Like others, I think I'm speaking in favor of keeping the current time, just in that it seems like we've been pretty successful with maintaining quorum at our meetings, which is important. So if that's been the status quo, that would be my inclination, but obviously would hear from others too.
Thank you, Jeff. And I'll note that Lynn and Louie in the chat said that this time works for both of them. See if there are any other hands. Not seeing any. Stephanie in the chat says this works for her, as does Isa and Melissa. I should have asked the question the opposite way. Is there anyone who has an objection or difficulty with this time for our quarterly meetings, the times and dates that we have them set? So it seems like there's a pretty good consensus otherwise. All right, anything else before we vote on this item? All right, seeing nothing, does anyone have a motion?
Point of order, do we need to vote to maintain the schedule now, or can we sort of accept that we've had an opportunity to change it if necessary, that no one has chosen to take that up, and just kind of keep it the way that it is?
I'm not sure what the answer to that is. I think if there's no changes, there's no motion to be had, but maybe Jill can speak to that.
I see it says vote. So, I mean, since it's noted as voting on the agenda, which doesn't have to be noted as voting to take a vote, but since it does suggest that you all make a motion to keep it the same and vote on it.
Thank you, Jill.
Well, based on that update, then thank you, Jill. I'll make a motion to maintain the time and date for our quarterly meetings.
Okay, motion by Jeff, second by, I missed that. Who was our second?
Isa.
Oh, Isa, thank you. Second by Isa. Nicole, do you want to take the vote?
Melissa?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
G.A. Becton?
Yes.
Louis?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Lashante?
She put yes in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Walker?
Yes.
Tamisha?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Stephanie?
Yes.
And Cheryl?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm gonna make sure I didn't miss anyone that came a little bit later. Looks
One
like
quick question is, did you ask for public comment on that item?
I did not. Thank you. Is there any public comment on the scheduling of the Racial Justice Oversight Body quarterly meetings? I am not seeing any hands or anyone that wants to comment. Thank you for the reminder, Jill. So at this time, we're going to receive reports from our 3 subcommittees. So we'll start with the Community Engagement and Funding Subcommittee, and that report will be from Jeff Landau.
Thanks again, Ellen. And hi, everybody. Glad to be back in action with everyone as we're in the new year here. So I'll just quickly go through some of the content that's in our report. And I think I've done last time, sometimes it's helpful to just do my share screen on that. So I'm gonna pull that up. And hopefully everybody's able to see our report. So this is reflecting that we had the issue of our turnout on November 15th, having enough membership for quorum, but moving forward, we've been able to hit that and be in action. And I think part of that is credit to the changes that we approved last time. And I think I noted that it's improved efficiency because we were able to make changes so that the folks participating were really active, and that allowed us to be more agile and responsive to the needs so that we didn't have the chance of missing meetings. I'll go to the event that we have planned for this month, for February 16th. And we're still gonna hammer these final details, but I am certainly operating with the mindset that that's the game plan. And I think we'll have a further planning session tomorrow with our facilitators and Burns and ORJ. So let me just say some exciting updates. I think that, and again, just brief context, this is the event that we have scheduled presenting or co-sponsoring, I guess I'd say, with the data subcommittee. And it's really featuring the work that the data subcommittee has done and the information that they've obtained so that we can try to really share what's there, what we haven't received despite requests, and get feedback from community so that we can keep the process moving forward. As I said, we finalized the date of February 16th. It's going to be 6 to 7:30 p.m. And we did have a lot of discussion about having a time outside of the working hours, general business hours. This is going to be by Zoom, so that reduces some burdens on folks for transport. And also it allows people who are working during the day to be able to participate who might not otherwise be able to attend our oversight body meetings. Very excited that Dante Clark, a local artist, poet, has agreed to kick off the event with some of his readings from a recent publication of his, a collection of poetry. And he's just an incredible voice who can, I think, try to and will be wonderful, I know, in framing some of these issues, the data and the system involvement, numbers and charts in a way that really focuses and grounds us in how this is impacting people's lives and what that means as we're making the policy decisions, and it doesn't just boil down to percentages. So I think that's important. And we talked a lot about being intentional in other ways, being thoughtful in how we would try to present not just the charts and speaking to people in words, but images. And also this is a different form in art to launch it. And he's excited about it also. So that's exciting. And finally, finalizing program content. We've devoted a lot of our subcommittee meetings to this, of what will be the infographic, so to speak, what will be the presentation of the content and who will be doing that and how will we do it. And let's really be thoughtful in the prompts for discussion following before and after, so that we can make the most of the time, because we really have been gearing up for this. I'll also just add that we've made some progress in our community capacity fund guidelines. And I know that I think that's in fact older language, the capacity fund, and we've talked about expanding that language, as I think had in our subcommittee agenda packets. But that's moving forward as well in terms of its framing. And really the last few months have been a lot focused on this upcoming data event. And finally, I would note in terms of recap of our work that we've informed some of the Youth Advisory Council discussion of, that's one of our major campaigns, by looking at what Santa Clara has done. And that was presented to us from Burns, and kind of consideration of how we might start to look at different models. And I have an attachment as to this update from our subcommittee on the agenda packet for this quarterly meeting. So you can see that, as well as just some of the information we've received and are considering as we're continuing to move forward. Actions requested of the full RJOB, as Doug and Jane were mentioning in public comment at the beginning. I recall also, of course, that we had our last quarterly meeting, and that was in November. And when it happened, I had made requests for update on the status of our vote from August 5th of last year. And we talked about really specifics and language and urgency, that there be action on sheriff oversight. And when we were there at the quarterly meeting last time, I know, I think it was Paul Reyes from County Administrator's Office had said, hopefully December and early next year. And I know I was not able to attend the December 16th, I think it was, Public Protection Committee meeting. I was taking a quick look at the agenda packet, and it did look like it was incorporated in some way in agenda item 6 to the PPC meeting, which was receiving updates from subcommittees. So I don't know, this is kind of included in my request of the full RJOB. Was there discussion at the PPC meeting of our recommendation? And in addition to that, is there some further update that CAO could provide on the status of that? And then the other note that I have from actions requested was the vote we had taken previously for our community capacity fund project, is that we had presented vote to the full RJOB that if we're going to be able to take action in the way that we want to, we need some assistance and technical presentation of what would launch a larger document, which would kick this into the next phase. So we made the vote, and just seeing how do we, if there's an update that can be provided on the status of that recommendation or request to the Board of Supervisors. And I think apart from that, I would not add anything more, and would just invite any questions from public, if there are, about what's been going on in our subcommittee. And maybe I should stop my share screen or keep it up.
I think it's probably okay to stop the shared screen so
okay.
you can see everyone. Any comments or discussion? Thank you for that update, Jeff. I know I don't think I've missed a PPC meeting, and I don't believe this was on any of the agendas, but I know other folks here attend as well, and they'll correct me if I missed it.
Ellen, if I can, I'd like to provide an update. So I also can't speak to what was discussed at the last PPC meeting, but we did check in with the CAO's office about really all things having to do with the Racial Justice Oversight Body. And so there was an agreement to have an overview of the Rjob's activities of the previous year on the PPC agenda for their February 28th meeting, which would also incorporate all that's been discussed up to this point, including some of the recommendations that you all have discussed bringing forth to the Board of Supervisors. So we will be on the agenda for February 28th to, like I said, give an overview of Rjob and its work to date, as well as some of the requests that this body has made.
Thank you, Patrice. That's good to know, and it addresses the committee as well as some of the public comments. That's really helpful. Anyone else on Jeff's report? Doug.
Yes, that's good information from Patrice that there will be an item in the February PPC meeting on the RJOB, but that's not exactly the same thing as having the RJOB's recommendation related to sheriff oversight bodies actually be on the agenda as an agenda item. So if you as the RJOB can pressure or push the PPC agenda makers to put that on the agenda, that would be a welcome step forward.
Thank you, Doug. Melissa?
I wasn't sure if you're accepting comments from members and public at this time. So I unfortunately was not at the August meeting. I think that was the only one that I've missed so far, but I did just want to express, I understand that Rjob has already voted to make a recommendation for sheriff's oversight. But I do want to say as a member of the sheriff's office that it is a bit disappointing that this particular group would want to make that recommendation based on the history that the sheriff's office has had with not only the task force in the early initial stages, but also with the oversight bodies since it has been implemented. We've served not only as a co-chair with Assistant Sheriff John Loudon, but we've also been able to share our data that has been requested of us for a number of months now. Now, in the data subcommittee, we've discussed, which will probably come up in the update, we need some assistance for staffing in order to take that data and to put it into interpretable tables and things that really show what the data is going to support. But we've certainly wanted to provide whatever this oversight body has requested. So From our point of view, it is a bit disappointing that this recommendation is coming from this body just based upon our willingness and our openness with this group to be as transparent as possible. So I didn't have an opportunity to say that at the time, but I just wanted to share that with this group.
Thank you, Melissa. And I'll ask first if there are any other members of the Racial Justice Oversight Body that want to be heard, and then I can see one person who has a hand up in public comment. Anyone else who's a member? Tamisha?
Thank you, Ellen, for facilitating and moving us through the agenda. And congratulations in your new role, if I haven't told you before. Tamisha Walker, our Rjob member. I don't know if I want to necessarily respond directly to comments made by the representative from the sheriff's office, but what I would like to say is that this recommendation was pushed for by the community, not necessarily this body. And it's something that community across Contra Costa has been organizing for years around transparency, accountability, and oversight of the sheriff's department. And the original task force, for whatever reason, maybe because there wasn't enough energy for system folks who were also afraid that oversight for the sheriff might also mean oversight for their departments, didn't support this. And the community continued to push. And then it came back to this oversight body from the same community saying that like this should be a priority because it was a priority to the community and completely dismissed from individuals around the task force table before it was an oversight body. And so just standing in as, yes, one of those community members in the community requesting this it's really because the community pushed for it. The community brought it back to us. And now it's something they want us to move forward. I think we should make a recommendation to the PPC to move forward. And I also just know that if nothing comes from this body, the community will continue to push with or without us.
Thank you, Tamisha. I'm just looking for hands. Any other member of the Racial Justice Oversight Body before I move on to public comment? Not seeing any. Oh, I see Michael.
Okay, first I'd like to apologize for being late. I was on another presentation that was previously scheduled. I'd like to know kind of the specific concerns that Melissa had. I like, you know, are there things in particular, or is it just the overall idea of the oversight, or is there anything in particular that's an issue?
Thank you, Michael. No, there is nothing in particular. I think it's more of just the promotion of the idea from a group that we believe that we are working very well with and being very transparent with. So that is the concern that and I understand what Tamisha is talking about, you know, a push from the community, and certainly I am aware of that and I understand that. I think it's just that push coming from this, or recommendation coming from this particular group is what's I guess a bit disappointing, just because we feel that we are being transparent and providing data to this group to hopefully help this group get the information that they're looking for to identify the disparities and move towards action to reduce and eliminate those disparities. So I hope that answers your question, but nothing in particular, no.
Any other members of the oversight body? All right, not seeing anyone for public comment. I see Jane's hand is up. Jane, you're on mute.
I guess I am one of those community members. While I appreciate that the sheriff's office has been transparent, has come forth with materials that this body has requested, it seems very appropriate to me that this is the body to be pushing for this, since this was a recommendation of the original Racial Justice Task Force. And at the time that the supervisors chose not to support the final recommendation, which was to create an oversight body for the jails and the sheriff's department. The explanation, of course, was that there was really no legal basis for that. Well, things have changed. As I'm sure many of you are aware, 1185 passed, and I guess it became law in 2021, and it mandated, or it certainly supported, the ability of counties to authorize such oversight bodies. Whereas I just feel any entity, I mean, this doesn't just go for, this is not a personal thing with our sheriff's department. Think of any body that has its own internal oversight. That's very different from an outside body having oversight. We're seeing, changes even in the military, where all kinds of things were strictly internal. There are checks and there are balances. And so in this case, we have legal authority now to establish such an entity. So I just wanted to point those things out. I'm sure many of you recognize them, but I did want to add my voice as someone, as a member of the community that Tamisha has mentioned, and to support the comments that my colleague Doug Leach has made. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to be heard? All right, so we have our next subcommittee report, which is the report from the Data Subcommittee by Rebecca.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy to be here to bring our Data Subcommittee report, and it's included in the agenda packet starting on page 12. Should I share my screen? If I follow what Jeff did, I suppose I should, so I can share it there. Okay, I will do so. Can somebody confirm that you can see that? Okay, great. Thank you for the thumbs up. Okay, so I just want to recap a couple things that have happened. We only have had 2 meetings since the last quarterly report, just because of how the dates fell, and one of them was in fact last Thursday. Some things that we want to share with you is that we did have a discussion in our subcommittee about follow-up from the mayor's conference presentation. Thank you, Michael Pearson, for conducting that. And Tamisha, I believe, was the other person who was there. Thank you both for bringing that. So in terms of following up from that, we have on our to-do list as a subcommittee to draft a letter, including an easy way for the police LEAs to sign and authorize data sharing with us. But we need some clarification about a couple items, and there are some things that I'm going to discuss in this report right now that hopefully we can get some clarification before we can finalize that letter. As Melissa shared earlier, we do have some questions about how we are going to be dealing with this data if we do get it from people, because that's part of, we want to make it easy for people to say yes to share, but we also want to tell them accurately who's going to be holding the data and what we're going to be doing with it. So that's part of what I have some points further on down on the agenda here to discuss, and hopefully we can have a conversation about that. At this point in time, we are collecting data from the probation department and presenting that, and that was included as an attachment here of what we are currently receiving and reviewing every quarter. And we had asked the sheriff's office if they would be willing to pass along the data files that they present. Their data is very, there's a lot of it. It's very voluminous. And so it cannot be included in the same line by line because it's, I think I'm not sure, Melissa, how much there was, but like something like 3,000 or something, just a lot of entries. So it would take like a ream of paper to print that. But it is available on their contemporaneous arrest log. But they did not feel comfortable at this point in time passing that data to Hayward Burns, as we were thinking that potentially they would be able to work with the data and produce some analysis. So, and ORJ is working with probation and providing the data from probation, but they don't have the bandwidth in order to do the same sort of thing with all of the police LEAs should we get authorization. So that, you know, kind of brings up the question of what are we going to do with the data if we do get it. So in regards to that, you know, like I said, we did look at the data that's included in there, and that's on the next pages. So for juvenile hall, we look at the intakes by race and ethnicity, by gender, by age, by arrest zip code, by arresting agency, and by offense type, number of offenses, number of offenses, also the results of the matter, and the average days between disposition and the date of program entrance. The number, this is a new one that they provided this time, but the counts of juveniles by race and ethnicity and the previous number of admittances to juvenile hall. So to look at recidivism as in regards to race and ethnicity of the intakes. And then here's the actual, these are the actual events. So here the PID number that refers to an individual. So looking at this, this is one, the first individual here has just one line, but if you look down to individual number 5, there are multiple rows that cover the same individual. So that's part of how to look at that piece of data. So we do look at this and discuss this for the probation department every quarter now. We used to do it every time we met, but we've moved to looking at it every quarter, which I think is helpful. And then we also, the County Office of Ed provides this information about the number of intakes that in each month have special education status and also the English language fluency for the students. And, you know, that reflects, hold on just one second.
Anybody needs a stretch break? We might have a minute. Oh,
I'm back. I'm sorry. I'm at the ranch right now, so I'm not in my regular office. And so here we have the special education and English language for the intakes that we had for that quarter as well. So that's the kind of data that you know, we would be looking to get from all the different police LEAs. But like I said, we're not really sure what we're asking permission for, where it will go. So that's part A of that. And so one question that we did put in our report there is whether this office, the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice, is going to have a component for a data collection, because it seems that from my understanding, which I have to admit is not that full, but I'm sure other people here have a fuller understanding, that office is organized to serve the different bodies of the county. And so we wondered if that might be a place that a data could be centralized through that office. And so whether it was possible to just to know whether that was in the current funding or a current thought, and if not, if there might be a way for our body to recommend that there be funding for a position to do that. So that's kind of that item. And then a couple more things, and maybe we can come back. I'm sure people will have things to say about that. But maybe, I don't know if Patrice and Melissa, if you guys want to give an update about the policing the teen brain and where we're at with that. Would one or both of you be willing to do that?
Sure. Melissa, I don't know, you want to go first since you talked with Strategies for Youth, and then between myself and Denise, we can also share about some funding that we are trying to go after.
Absolutely. So the ORJ found a company called Strategies for Youth. They're out of, I believe it's in Massachusetts. They're over on the East Coast, and they provide training for law enforcement called Policing the Teen Brain. And it's geared towards adolescent youth, and giving officers some background information and also some skills to be able to engage with adolescents, understand some of the things that they have going on to better help them have communications and ultimately decrease arrests and negative contacts with those individuals. And it's a really unique training opportunity. We don't have anything equivalent to that currently in training that's offered to our law enforcement officers. However, the training is quite expensive, and they offer two different types of training. They offer sort of a standard traditional training where they open it up to students. They can be from all different agencies, and they'll come in and do a 2-day training, I believe. That's a little more abbreviated, but they'll still provide them some skills and some background information. But then they also offer a Train the Trainer program, which is specific for one agency. They want to focus on an agency. They go in and find out more about the community. They look into the agency's policies and procedures, and they develop a curriculum that's custom made to that agency to help them create a program within their agency to provide training agency-wide. And that training is more expensive. It's in the, I think, $50,000 to $70,000 range, but it's a lot more in depth. They utilize local psychologists. They ask for local youth to participate in the training, doing some scenario training with the officers. So, and they also reach out to some of the community-based organizations that serve youth. So it's really inclusive, not only just for law enforcement, but for the community itself. So we were certainly very interested in this training. For law enforcement, there's an accrediting body called POST, and they accredit us in our basic police academy and our ongoing training. And if a training course is certified through POST, there are some beneficial reimbursements for the agency. Sometimes the state will reimburse the department for all of the training costs or some of the training costs. So there's a benefit for these companies to be certified for POST. And Strategies for Youth attempted certification, but for some reason were denied. So the training division at the Sheriff's Office is working with them and some of our POST contacts to see if it is possible to get them certified as a POST certified training opportunity. But then in the meantime, and I think I'll pass it over to Patrice at this point, we're also looking at some other funding opportunities that might offset the costs of this training for the law enforcement agencies in the county.
Great, thank you, Melissa. And I'll probably pull on Denise as well. We did submit a proposal for federal community project funding that's available through, these are what were formerly known as federal earmarks. And so the request from department heads, from Lara Delaney, who's staffer to our legislative committee for the Board of Supervisors, made it available for folks to submit project proposals for things that they would like to see our lobbyists actually advocate on behalf of various departments in the county. So we thought that this would be a great opportunity. The earmark would be anywhere between 500,000 to a little over $1 million. And so in our proposal, we did take into account overtime costs that LEAs would have to incur for their officers to participate in the training. We also share this through the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council as well. And so there were a number of folks who were also interested and could see the alignment of this with potential JJCPA funding. But for now, we want to go the route of the federal earmarks because there's just a robust amount of dollars that are there, and have the JJCPA resources more so for the community than for training officers. But nonetheless, there are some buckets of funding that we can certainly tap into. And so we are moving in that direction to possibly have something set aside for all of our LEAs. Denise, did I miss anything, or is there anything else you want to add on that?
There is only one thing I'd like to add. You did such a great job with that. As a part of this federal community funding project, we will, the application is going to necessitate letters of support from our partner agencies. So our office will be seeking those out and inviting law enforcement agencies throughout the county to support the program. It's not necessarily a commitment to participate, but an indicator that the agency is aware of the program, supports the program, and supports our application for earmark funds in order to do this. So the deadline is looking to be, although it's according to our federal lobbyist, it's shifting a bit, but it's looking to be the end of the month. So I'm shooting for February 28th. And ideally, we'll have a letter coming out and a sample model template for a letter of support that will go out as well, so that we can gather those quickly before the final package needs to go in. And I think those are all the key points.
Thank you, Patrice and Denise and Melissa, for that update about that. And then I just want to circle back. There are two other items that we had on our report. And one of them is that maybe, Chris, I don't know if you want to talk about the item that is regarding bringing a training to the whole body regarding how we measure race and ethnicity in the criminal justice system. Do you want to say a few words about that?
Sure. It took me a second to, I think we use different language sometimes when we're talking about these things, and I was like, wait a minute, what is that? But now I think I got it. So basically, when we get data, right, we want to make sure that what we have is as accurate as possible. And a lot of times where there are issues in terms of an accurate count or getting accurate numbers or representation from specific populations. I mean, that happens across racial lines, I suppose, to some degree, but specifically with the Latinx community, right? Because that's ethnicity, which, goes along with race, meaning a person could be white and Latino, or a person could be Black or Asian and Latinx as well, right? And so a lot of times, if a local jurisdiction doesn't have a set of practices around how they're going to do that, that they can be consistent about, and that at least are informed by best practices that have been established, certainly at the federal level, then there's some faulty information or some potential lack of accuracy around which communities are represented in which ways in the data that we have. And so as we were talking about, the training session that you just heard so much about, I would routinely in the data subcommittee meeting say, hey, that's great, that should happen, you should do that, but you've got language in your work plan based on the recommendations that's specifically about sort of database training, right? Like, how do we make sure that folks are, again, developing that sort of consistency around how we collect and report data so that it's accurate. And so something that we had spoken about was potentially having, again, one of our resident data experts, not me, lead this group potentially through talking about what those best practices are and looking to hopefully continue engaging agencies, even agencies that are not necessarily represented within this group if they are interested at some point in the future. And sort of at least what the concepts are, what the thinking is, and then, be up to them to begin to decide how to implement those things or what that would require on their end and how long it might take before they can actively, sort of make those practice changes that will result in the desired outcome. So that is something that we were talking about potentially having on the agenda for the next quarterly meeting if folks are interested.
Thank you, Christopher. So that is something for discussion here in this group. And I think that, Chris, you thought that that person could be available to do that training in May because there's enough notice, right? So if it was the will of the body, you thought that it would be possible to have them attend the next meeting. Okay, and then just one other item, which is that we did send a letter to our district attorney who's here today. So hi, DA Becton. And we just wanted to follow up about that in the larger body since we hadn't heard anything back from the office. And so just to follow up with that from our request. And I also put a copy of the request that we sent in the agenda packet from October. So I wonder if people might have input or the ability to have a discussion about the issue that we raised throughout this about the data sharing and the agreements and who will hold the work of working with the data once we got it. Maybe Ellen, I would pass it back to you to facilitate a discussion about that if that's possible.
And when appropriate, I'd like to comment on the request for data from the DA's office.
Sure. Thank you, Rebecca. DA Becton, I'll pass it over to you maybe to comment and then we can discuss.
Sure. So thank you for sending the request to our office for the data. I think I'm pretty sure Chief Assistant Simon O'Connell appeared at a data subcommittee to explain our lack of really capability of extracting the data that you're requesting out of our system. But wanting to make sure that this committee knows that data is really for 2022 is really my #1 priority. And I'm working on a number of fronts to be able to not only provide data on a consistent basis, but to stand up a dashboard so that members of the public can go directly to the dashboard and have questions answered about the work of the district attorney's office, because I believe transparency is so important. So to that end, we're working with the APA, which is the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys, and they have subcontracts with an organization called Measures for Justice, which a number of you may be familiar with, and they've helped a number of offices to stand up data boards around the country. We are currently reviewing a possible contract with them. The first phase of it, though, is really not necessarily digging into the data, but doing an assessment of our data capabilities, which is important. And they will also be contacting this body because I have given them your letter and the request that this body has made. And they will contact this body because of the fact that community input is so important about what kind of data we're going to be releasing. So that's one front that we're working on. We're continuing to work with the Vera Institute, and we're hoping, I think we have a commitment for them to also help us to extract data out of our system and to organize it in a way that can be released. And then finally, I am working through the CAO's office and also hoping that there's no opposition to me retaining a private company that also has the capability to help us dig into our data so that we can have the information available not only to help us with our own policies, but also to be transparent to the community that we serve. I have also asked in this round of budget negotiations for a data analyst, which we also do not have, because as you're finding out, it's going to be very important once, even if I get an entity to extract the data for us, we're going to need an analyst to be able to help us put it in some kind of context that's readable and understandable and useful to the community. So I'm working on 3 different fronts. I got hands in about 4 different pots now to try to get the resources that we need, because the system in the way it is set up right now is really like opening up an electronic file, but it doesn't give us the opportunity to actually extract reports and information that you're requesting. But it is our priority. We are working on it, and I hope to be able to stand up that kind of information in this coming year. Thank you.
Thank you, DA Becton. And now from the members of the oversight body, I think it's time to have a discussion around data. I think the report back from the data subcommittee was really helpful. I'm impressed with the amount of data we have from the probation department, and I thought that was great to see. It's well laid out, and it really does, tell a story around not just race and age and ethnicity, but looking at those, the zip codes and the agencies and the charging. So I really appreciate being able to see that as well. And on that note, I can see Isa has her hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just wanted to, as a point of clarification for the body, something that Becky said, bandwidth of ORJ is only one part of why I do not feel it's appropriate to be the repository of the law enforcement agency data. Now that the ORJ is an operational division of probation, it's just not necessarily appropriate for us to be analyzing other law enforcement agencies' data necessarily, which is why when it was brought to my kind of an ask of me, I said, no, that's really not appropriate. For some clarification, ORJ staffs RJOB at this point in time, though I don't know that they'll always staff RJOB as this new office is developed. I've been in some conversations to see if it wouldn't be more appropriate for that office. Now, the 109 allocation, the portion of 109 allocation that has typically gone to fund the contracts for facilitation of this work would still absolutely flow to support it. However, I don't know that ORJ will always be staff to this body. And like I said, with that said, with ORJ, however, being an operational division, it's just not an appropriate repository for that other law enforcement agency data. So I just wanted to add that point of clarification. Bandwidth is certainly a component of it as we are increasing the work of the ORJ, but it's not the only reason why we would not be assuming that responsibility.
Thank you so much. Jeff?
Thanks, Ellen. And thank you to the data subcommittee for all the work that you've been doing. And there's so much that's here. I just wanted to touch on the point of the request to the DA's office for data and the response back. Basically, the letter that was provided and what DA Becton had just mentioned, I had come across through a colleague information that the ACLU in Northern California had requested data from all the different DA's offices. I figured I would just put the link into the chat. That looking at that, just a bit there, had seen that there were reports of filings, arrests, outcomes from our county through database called Justware. And it's more than I could include in terms of the pages here, but I guess what I'd say, it seemed like it was tracking pretty well to the quarterly reports from probation in terms of that level of detail. I know, Rebecca, you were going through that, right? That individual level, these were the charges, this was the outcome, this is the status, all of that was included there, which it would take time to work with, I suppose, to have presented in a little bit cleaned up formatted, but at least that was, those are public documents because they were provided in response to the public records request. So it's a starting point in terms of at least my understanding of what might be possible in terms of specific reports and case search. So I just thought I would bring that to the table as something that seemed relevant that I had come across.
Jeff, did you say you were going to put that in the chat? I don't see it in the chat.
Oh, excuse me. I think I can do that now.
Okay. Great, now I see it. Thank you.
Okay, we'll just take a minute if anyone wants to look at that. Melissa?
One of the things that we talked about in our subcommittee meeting is a benefit of having a central repository for the data collection would be the ability to track sort of the story of an individual all the way through the criminal justice system, and being able to collect data not only from the law enforcement agency and probation and maybe the courts and the district attorney's office and so forth. You could actually see some trends throughout the entire process. And I think that was one of the reasons that the subcommittee thought if there is a possibility of putting it towards one entity that can collect and analyze that data, we would be able to get a better and a fuller picture, especially as time goes on with the data collection. So I hope that's something that we can do. Certainly we can analyze the data individually, but I think a huge benefit would be to be able to see it in the whole story format, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Melissa. Any other members want to be heard on this topic? And Patrice, was there anything on this that ORJ was hoping membership would advise on, or anything that would help in terms of direction?
No, I think at this time, this is more or less an update. I think based on what Becky just shared, at least with regards to having this body consider requesting resources through the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice to provide some support around the data piece is also worth exploring among the membership. But other than that, there's no further direction that we need.
Thank you. And I would definitely be in support of requesting funding through ORSJ or ESJ on the data side. I think it's one of those issues where if you don't have someone who's able to really dig in, we kind of just end up going in circles. And you know, it really would be, I think, the perfect sort of organizational landing space for that work in this new office. So I think it's at least something that's worthy of a fuller discussion. And I can see Jeff agreeing.
And one more thing, if I could offer just further context in our discussion around this, was that, and I think you got a taste of it just now in hearing DA Becton and then also from Melissa, the challenge of getting to the place of having the capacity to actually share the information that community wants to see in a manner that is actually digestible, and that in fact the departments are able to then collect the right information that is quality information, and that it is available for analysis to really understand what is happening across our entire system. So when you're talking about data collection, management, building up the infrastructure, I mean, DA Becton along is sharing all of the various buckets that she's trying to explore. I know within our own department, we're doing similar work. So it is a great big behemoth. And so in our view, it requires a larger strategy around how does the county want to, what is the mechanism, or beyond just the holder of it, but what is the mechanism that should be in place? What's the data strategy we want to have that will get us to the end of actually answering the questions that community wants answers to. So it is much larger than just simply having a staff person. it requires essentially a build out of a full-on infrastructure, and adequate resources need to be available to do so. And further to Chief's point, that it's one thing when you have a department trying to analyze all departments' other data, right? So there's also some governance structure, some ways in which some compromises or some agreements can be developed and negotiated. And so who steers those kind of conversations is really going to be important for future work around anything having to do with justice related work. So that was really the context of how this came up. It might be more than just having a staff person. It might require a full-on assessment of what it would take and what is necessary to kind of get to the place we want to be around utilizing data to tell the stories of what's happening.
Thank you, Patrice. That's helpful. Becky?
I just want to agree with everything that Patrice said, and thank you for putting it all together in such a clear way. It just made me think also of the fact that I do think that we have a good model within this county of a county agency that is using data and providing a live dashboard or very close to live dashboard that's very user friendly in regards to the coronavirus dashboard that exists. And so I'm not saying that we would ever get to kind of like that daily update level that they're at there, but that is an example of a county agency that is really doing more than just, as Patrice was saying, it takes more than just having a single person like crunching numbers, but really like thinking about the user side of the data and constantly, working to improve what's there, changing in regards to what becomes available. And I know that Dr. Walker, has been involved in that, and he's here right now with us. So I don't know if you have any thoughts, Dr. Walker, but I just know that I look at that dashboard all the time, and I know that a lot of work is put into it. And so I just, as another county agency, I thought it's worth pointing out that there is a precedent for that.
Yeah, it obviously has been a huge undertaking during the pandemic to have the available data in readable form on dashboard with the, close to millions of hits that we've been getting from the community. They want to know what's up, what's happening, what we're doing, the vaccination status is, et cetera. But that's an ongoing, quickly moving target. I think perhaps the dashboard we're talking about is a lot slower moving, if you will, and perhaps easier to maintain. And our folks have obviously had a lot of expertise developed in the last couple of years in how to display data. And I'm sure that we could make some of their talents available to help guide what our dashboard should look like. But let's just leave it at that. So.
Health assessment, I probably said that wrong. That demonstrates some recent advantages to greenhouse gas reduction.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. Cheryl?
More in just as important as what the data is going to look like, it can be as beautiful as possible. Where is the access to the data? I know I bring this up every time, and I'm going to bring it up again. Where's the access to the data? We have to make sure that people know where it is, they know how to get it. It is easily accessible and is easily understandable to the people, to the community. And as savvy as many of us may be in maneuvering county sites, those sites are hardly user-friendly. And having to push 3 and 4 and 5 different links to get to something. Sometimes just to get to a meeting site, you got to keep pushing buttons and you got to keep pushing links. And then it takes you down I-80 and up 580 and around 24 and then back to the same site again. It's not friendly, you guys. And just because some of us are used to it or we bookmarked it, and especially if you bookmarked it, you forget how difficult it is to actually access it from the outside. So I would implore us to make sure that we're making it easier, not harder, for people to access the data, that we're collaborating with community organizations that people do trust and people are familiar with, to make sure that they have direct links to the dashboard and to the data sites, so that they can put that on their sites. And that explanations for some of these acronyms that we keep throwing around a lot, that we may know, that the general public does not, that is somewhere explained in layman's terms, and is not in this long dictionary that somebody got to go look up and look up a bunch and push a bunch of links to get to, that list is somewhere that's readily available. Because I can tell you the most frustrating thing for people is when they got to push a link to go to another page and figure out what something is that you're talking about. And I'm guilty of that because I speak a lot of language and I speak a lot of, I'm a scientist, so jargon is what I do. But we got to make sure we're speaking to the people in the language and speaking to the hearts and the minds of the people who need this information in a way that they understand. There's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Anyone else from the Racial Justice Oversight Body want to be heard on the data discussion? All right, seeing no one, is there any public comment on Becky's report or on this data subcommittee discussion?
Ellen, I just want to point out that there was one other item, which is to discuss or confirm the idea of having the discussion / training surrounding how we report race and ethnicity at the May meeting.
Great, thank you so much. So any discussion, maybe I'll circle back if there's any discussion from any Racial Justice Oversight Body member about either topic. Now is the time.
Can you clarify, Ms. Becky, what is it that you wanted to?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I feel like that maybe there are a lot of different ways to say this. So I was meaning the training that Christopher was discussing, that Hayward Burns could bring about the best practices and how to collect data about race and ethnicity. The issues that he spoke about, if people can be more than one group or, have different associations, and how we're recording that discussion.
Thank you for the clarification. And I'm also wondering, I know part of our upcoming discussion is going to be around our plans for 2022. So that might be something that has some overlap and could go on our list. In that,
I know we had a lot. I just wanted to make sure that
thank you for flagging that.
Thank you.
So on that note, Ms. Ellen, I do have something to say.
Great.
Okay, so we ran into these last week at the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice, where they broke everybody into these rooms. And so the way they defined the rooms was a little frustrating for me, because they were trying so hard to be so inclusive and so politically correct that they broke them down too much. And those of you who know me know I fit into about 5 different categories. So I was so mad. I was like, okay, so which room do I go to, right? You had a room for Black, and then it was Latino, and then it was API, and then it was mixed race, and then it was BIPOC. And I was like, okay, so what? Which room did I go to? And so that is very, very frustrating. And so to Christopher's point is when you talk about equity and you're talking about inclusion, you're asking people to present themselves as their authentic self, right? Their whole self. And you can't be your whole self when you're also asked to parse yourself into these different categories. So when you're breaking down race and ethnicity and looking at data, but you're asking somebody to parse themselves is almost counterintuitive. And the other category that's missing here is when we're talking about equity and this thing, and I'm talking about this because I know a lot about equity. I teach on this and subject matter expert in this, is not just about race and gender. It's also about class and access. So those four things. What is your access to these systems that are going to prevent you from being caught up in the criminal legal system? And I believe D.A. Becton often talks about this as well, right? And Ms. Tamisha and she talks about this often, is what is your access to these diversity, to these programs that are offered that are going to keep you out of the criminal legal system. And if you don't have access, that is also, Ms. Stephanie from RISE also. So that is a determining factor on whether young people are going to be kept out of criminal legal system. What is your income level? What is the zip code that you live in? So it's not just race and gender, but it is also class and access. So I think we have to look at the data in all of those categories. And I know that I've seen these in the presentations that Ms. Dinah Becton has given, and I know that both Tamisha and Stephanie have also addressed it, and I've seen it in the Burn Center. So I would like for us to also think of that when we're talking about equity. There's just my quarter or 5 cents worth.
It was at least 50 cents and maybe $1. Thank you, Cheryl. Other thoughts on this topic? And then I'll leave some space for public comment now. Any public comment? All right, not seeing any hands. So our next item is a report from our diversion subcommittee, and Stephanie is going to report in about this.
Thank you, Ellen, and apologies in advance, everyone. There's a lot happening outside my window. There's on again, off again jackhammering, and there's just a lot going on. So I'm going to try to get through this quickly. And apologies for not having a written report. So this will be purely an oral report. We do have our diversion definition that's in the packet. At the end of last year, we decided to do kind of a group visioning to help us think about what we want to focus on for 2022. And so it was a really good exercise for us. And we came up with some different paths that we potentially want to look at for 2022. We haven't had a chance to go back over this as a group. So I don't necessarily want to share everything now, but because we didn't have our January meeting, but we had a chance to talk about some different paths we want to look at as a group over this year. We talked about who was missing, how can we include some of the folks that aren't in the room, like formerly incarcerated people, young people, and really kind of take a look at what are some, re-looking at our work plan from the past, so we can adjust and pivot from some of those things, but also making sure that we're staying on top of what are some of the wins that we've had. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about what's happened in our job over the past few years or so, but really starting to focus on what are some of the things that the diversion committee needs to bring to the full body so that we can push for different things at the Board of Supervisor level. One of the things that we've looked at over several committee meetings is COCO Lead Plus, and looking at what is some of the criteria. COCO Lead was a diversion, adult diversion program that the county was doing, and looking at some of the criteria that was in that particular program. And one of the things that we would like to do is to figure out how can we take some of that criteria, what else needs to be added to it so we can build recommendations for diversion programs in the county moving forward. Also, with the diversion definition, looking at, I don't think it's been presented to the Board of Supervisors yet. I know that we did as a full body, I believe we approved it, but also thinking about some of the things that we need to, like I said before, bring to the Board of Supervisors that haven't been brought to the Board of Supervisors yet. we came up with this definition. It's a good definition. We even maybe need to tweak it a little bit because it's been a while. But making sure we're not just we're not just creating things just to be creating them, but who are we creating them for? How do we need to move things forward? Just so it's not sitting around and it's actually working for us. So those are some of the things that we've been talking about. We have some committees that will be looking at some of that criteria, then reporting back to our larger group. And hopefully we'll find out a little bit more about that in February. And some stuff is that's about it. Chris, if I'm missing anything, please add, but I'm about to go on mute really quick.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'll just add the reason, part of the reason that we didn't have the diversion subcommittee meeting was because we wanted to have this conversation. It's something that had come up and just hadn't been scheduled. So we used some of that meeting time to have one of the smaller working group meetings. I think that discussion went really well. So we had so many people interested in that we were potentially running into quorum issues. So we had to break it up a little bit. And DA Becton mentioned Simon O'Connell, who I think is DA's representative in the diversion subcommittee at this point. And so he has already responded with his availability, trying to get something scheduled for early next week to, just to share, where the conversation is currently and to see what feedback there is. And also just looking to make sure, I don't mean to put him on the spot, but I'm going to. So Mike Pearson was one of the folks who had mentioned being interested in that. And so we can just working with him to finalize a date next week to have that conversation. And then we'll put it on the calendar. And hopefully, like Stephanie said, for the next diversion subcommittee meeting, we'll be able to share back, sort of where things are up to this point. And I just want to point out to all of the folks here who are on the diversion subcommittee, if you didn't, choose to be a part of that working group, you have not lost your chance to speak to any of this. This is just, an opportunity to take sort of an opening shot at what we're looking at to kind of get something on paper for you to respond to. But definitely the plan is for the diversion subcommittee meeting to dive into, what the eligibility criteria look like. Obviously, we started from the COCO Lead Plus model, but modifications have been made based on thinking up to this point, and that will continue. And then we want to hear from you guys, right? So this is going to be a draft that, you'll see, and the purpose of showing it to you will be, well, what do you think? What needs to change? What needs to be added or subtracted or revised? So just as I'm saying that, I want to be sure, that folks understand that you will have a chance to be heard on it, even if you weren't in a smaller working group, taking an extra, hour and a half out of what I'm sure are already busy schedules for that purpose. So looking forward to that discussion coming soon.
Thank you, Stephanie and Christopher, for the update. And I'll just add, as a member of the diversion subcommittee, one of the pieces we've looked at is, of course, using some of the guidance from COCO Lead Plus, but really trying to broaden and make it a little more contemporary, asking the DA's office to give us, some of the most frequently filed charges, so that when we do kind of have a discussion in our full body around some of these parameters, we're really sort of discussing the type of charges and the type of cases that impact the most individuals that are going through our criminal legal system. And also recognizing, when we kind of initially set some parameters years ago for COCO Lead Plus, there were very different individuals in the room from different agencies, and it was, one law enforcement agency in the county, and this is a very different approach that we're taking now, but I think it is helpful to kind of have at least the structure of those original guidelines. So we can open it up for discussion from the Racial Justice Oversight Body members about the Diversion Subcommittee report. All right, I'm not seeing anyone. Is there any public comment on this report? I see Patrice.
Yeah, I just have one question. I didn't make it to the last few diversion subcommittee meetings, but I'm curious to know that as you guys are looking through the criteria, has there been some discussion about at what points are you looking for diversion to take place? I understand looking at eligible charges is one thing, but just thinking kind of further down the road, which law enforcement agency or justice agency would be involved in the actual diverting process. And so I'm curious if that was discussed at all.
We really haven't gotten to that point yet. I think we're still in the beginning phases of that, but that's definitely part of what we'll be looking at.
Thank you, Stephanie. Anyone else? All right, and I will pass to Tamisha. Are you ready to step in and co-chair the remainder of the meeting?
I knew that.
Before you move from diversion, can I say something?
Oh, absolutely. Sorry if I missed your hand. Yeah,
no problem. But I do want to respond to what Ms. Patrice asked, because I know I bring this up at every one of our diversion meetings. The desire is to divert them from the criminal legal system, period. Because we did look at the diversion chart. We looked at where there's possibilities to insert diversion along the way, right? And the desire is to start at the very beginning, especially with youth. Where can community come in at the very beginning? And it should be way before they even touch the criminal legal system. Whereas most models are showing along the way during the criminal legal system. And the desire should be way before they even enter the criminal legal system. And so that is something that we should be working with. There's where the data comes in, right? And where we look at the data to figure out how do we reach our young people, how do we reach the adults? But then there's also, after you look at the data, there's where the community engagement committee comes in what do we do? So we have the what, we already know what's happening, but then the data informs us at the rates, and then the who, and then the community engagement will help us figure out how. That was my take on it. This is my scientific brain working on how we stop it. Because it's one thing to give all this information, but then what do we do with it? And then how do we effect change? And it has to start on that left end of the paper when we're looking at it way before it even hits the system. And that's what we talked about at the last meeting. I think that's the one you're talking about, you missed.
Yeah, thank you, Cheryl. I think that's right. I mean, all of the literature and the programming is really showing that if you look at it kind of from an early intervention standpoint, there's so much to be gained from not waiting for individuals to progress through the system and to end up having all of the barriers that come from having charges filed against them or a criminal criminal case pending. So I think any model, I would strongly advocate for it to be very, very front end, very early intervention and pre-filing if at all possible. It's a model that really, you know, is a best practice in medicine to have an early intervention. It's a best practice, I think, in dealing with the kinds of issues we're dealing with as well. Ronell?
Yeah, I was just gonna, I don't know if you can hear me, but I was just gonna piggyback on that too. The interesting piece, not all diversion is documented. So based on discretion with officers in different, like Cheryl talked about, class is always left out when we're talking about diversion. I mean, not diversion, but you know, equity. And it's interesting because if you live in a certain neighborhood, or if you are a certain ethnicity, or if officers are familiar with you, if the officers live in that neighborhood, whatever it may be, the discretion there is, hey, you know, some kids just get taken home and other kids go to juvenile. So that process, like she said, from the left of the page, starts in the dark areas where it's hidden, right? So that's actual diversion. But it's not documented because it's just discretion from officers or anybody in the community that, you know, as opposed to prosecution, they find some other way to divert that, you know, that punishment or that, you know, documentation. So, and that's where, you know, class and, you know, gets into it too, because, you know, if you can't, if you don't fall in that category, then you fall in the other category, which is, you know, let's process this. So, you know, not all diversion is documented. I just want to say that.
I really appreciate that point. A lot of it just springs from the community's approach and how they react differently to different folks. Cheryl?
I was clapping.
Thank you for your applause, Cheryl. Good. Any other thoughts or comments from either our job members or members of the public about any of these reports before Tamisha takes over? All right. You ready, Tamisha? I can keep going. Tamisha, did you want to jump in and take item 6, or do you want me to keep going? I thought I saw you unmute. Oh, she's pulling up the agenda. I can introduce item 6 for everyone. We're discussing membership vacancies. And I don't know if there was a report. Patrice, are you able to give a report on this?
Yeah, so I'll update everyone on this one. So currently we have 2 vacancies, as you see here on the screen. This is on page 30 of the agenda. We have 2 vacancies for our CBO seats. And so we're bringing this to the body for a couple of reasons. One, we wanted to get feedback on when to actually initiate a recruitment process. If you all are interested in filling these seats immediately, or if you could take a look at the far right-hand column, you would see that all of the CBO representative seats will term out at the end of this year, as well as our school district representative seat, and who am I missing? And then our local law enforcement representative seat. So if you could scroll to the next page, Nicole, I want to share with you the previous recruitment process from 2 years ago that actually created the body. There was a 7-week application period, as well as an option for a 3-week application period. So what's before you is just, again, to get some feedback from you all as to whether or not these existing vacancy seats, if you all are interested in having those seats filled immediately, in which case, once they are filled, they will be fulfilling the remainder of the existing term. or if you would like to wait till to do a full recruitment of all of the seats that will be up, that will be termed out toward the end of this year, in which case we will work to do a more robust recruitment process, which will likely take place sometime in the fall, time. We also have, in addition to this sort of write-up on the application process, the options that we have here, either a 7-week or 3-week period. I think did we have a press release here for your reference as well, to show what this recruitment process was like in the past. So again, feedback from you guys on how you like to go about filling these seats with the consideration of all of the CBO seats, the school district representative seat, and the local law enforcement seat will term out at the end of this year. And also how, if we can get some feedback from you all on how you would like the recruitment process to go.
Thank you, Patrice. Jeff, I can see your hand is up.
Thanks. I think maybe my first question would be whether, there's going to be an impact on our ability to meet quorum with this, meaning if we have the seats vacant, then that's going to kind of always be a hurdle that we'll be overcoming and might not meet it. And then, or is that not actually relevant if we just decide we're not going to include these, we'll just determine them vacant and not fill? I don't know exactly how that plays out, but that's my initial thought. Wanting to maintain the seats, future looking, but in the meantime, that consideration.
Yeah, and I know Nicole has been keeping tally of attendance, and she's been doing a really great job of that, especially reaching out to folks to make sure we reach quorum for each meeting. So correct me if I'm wrong, Nicole, I think even for today, these vacancies set today, and we were still able to meet quorum and maintain it throughout the duration of this meeting. So I don't necessarily anticipate that the open seats would pose an issue, as long as everyone here shows up for for all of the quarterly meetings.
Yeah, I mean, the impact from a quorum standpoint is the full body and not so much the subcommittees, because these seats were removed from the subcommittees. I think the challenge with the full body is that the quorum doesn't change, whether the vacancy or not. So quorum is going to be 10 because you have 18 representative seats there. Doesn't seem to be a challenge today, but if we were to lose some others, we could start to run in some challenges in meeting that 10 for quorum in our full bodies.
Yeah,
but we only have quarterly meetings, so I don't think it's going to be as much of a challenge if we had monthly meetings.
Thank you for that clarification. I think that does weigh in favor of filling as soon as possible, but that's all that I had.
Tamisha?
I thank you for the visual. I did have a question as far as recruitment, just because I'm also on the JJCC, and I was like, oh, my time up already. And then I had to go through this process to get an extension. And now I'm like, oh man, we want to recruit more community so that we don't become a part of the bureaucracy and in these seats forever. And so I'm just looking at the chart and thinking to myself, it's like December of this year is when I know my seat is up. And part of it for me is is there a way for us to start recruiting, not just for vacant seats, but also seats that are coming up in this year, so that there could be a pool of applicants, rather than wait until a vacancy exists to start to recruit. And I don't even know if that's possible, but I'm just also thinking about all of these other bodies that, and particularly some of safer term folks are timing out of, and we're like, oh, what is the application process for ahead of a vacancy so that you can already have people to kind of you know, fold in or to contact. I don't know what it would take to do that, but I think it's just being more proactive if it's possible.
Thank you, Tamisha. Are there any other comments from members of the Racial Justice Oversight Body about this? I would just say I agree with both Jeff and Tamisha. I like the idea of filling the seats as quickly as we can. So I agree with that. And then Tamisha's suggestion about maybe a more robust recruitment plan that is kind of encompassing future vacancies as well, so that we're not doing, you know, one recruitment and then another, but hopefully there would be some interest. So not seeing anyone else from the Racial Justice Oversight Body, I will open it up to public comment, and I see Jill has her hand raised.
Hi there, thanks so much. The first thought that came to mind was that the Racial Justice Task Force really worked hard to build this membership, and it was important to them that these members be part of this oversight body. So I do think it's important to attempt to fill those seats. And to answer Tamisha's question, like in our office, when we have an opening, we keep all applications on file. So as soon as we have a vacancy, we will reach back to those applications or those applicants and ask if they're still interested. So I think that it's sort of a twofold thing. You could collect interest from the community and reach back to them when it comes to the fall. And certainly recruitment would be happening in the fall for those December seats, so that there is no lapse in coverage.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Any other public comment? Do we need to take a vote? This does say vote. So does anyone have a motion on this item regarding membership vacancies, about anyone's inclination to either fill them now or wait per Patrice's report?
I was seeing another hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. I see another hand in public comment. Sorry about that, Doug. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, yes, I agree with what Jill Ray just said, that it is important to fill these vacant seats ahead of the end of the year.
Thank you, Doug. Anyone else for public comment? All right, not seeing anyone. Does anyone have a motion on this item of filling our membership vacancies?
Yeah, I'll move the item.
And your recommendation, Cheryl, would be that they be immediately filled?
Yes.
Great. So Cheryl has moved the item, recommending that they be immediately filled per Patrice's report. Any seconds?
I just had a question maybe on like clarification of language with this. And I was thinking of, you know, Cheryl, you were saying that yes, let's fill them. Is there something maybe more specific that it needs to be phrased in terms of we're recommending that this be referred to specific, something like that to make sure that it takes action? That's just kind of clarification, but I agree with the gist of the idea. Let's fill them, of course. So that's just input. It may be sufficient that we say we're requesting they be filled.
Yeah, the only thing I would say to that is that if the body votes to moves and votes to approve that the seats be filled immediately, then we would get to work to release to follow most likely that 3-week sort of application process and send out a press release so folks are aware that the seats are open and available, and start retrieving applications. And then we'll also work with the CAO's office to see at what point will we schedule interviews for the PPC meeting.
Thank you, Patrice. And I can see we have a screen share detailing the various application periods. And I see we have one more hand. Jill?
Yeah, Patrice, I'm wondering, does the PPC have to review this and approve the application opening and period, or how does that work? I know in the past, these items have gone to them and asked them what.
Yeah, so because we're on the agenda for the 28th, and we'll be discussing all things RJOB related, we'll most likely bring this forward to them as well to get their feedback and our approval. And hopefully get an indication from there as well as to when would they like to see interviews take place at a future PDC meeting.
Perfect, thank you.
So for clarity, if we were, Patrice, to amend Cheryl's motion, if she's willing to make it consistent with a 3-week application period and that the body is recommending to fill these seats forthwith, would that work from your perspective to get the recruitment moving?
Yeah, and just note that application period will probably happen post us bringing it to PPC on the February 28th meeting.
Understood. Cheryl, are you amenable to those modifications to your motion?
That's fine, because immediately is really, it's the county's immediately, it's not ours.
Fair enough.
So it's a procedural, right?
Exactly.
So it's
great.
fine.
And did we have, so we have a motion and do we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second from Jeff, and we will vote.
Melissa?
Yes.
Melvin?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Louis?
Yeah. Yes.
Lynn? Did we lose Lynn? You're there. You can unmute yourself or put your vote in chat, Lynn, if you're not able to unmute.
No,
LaShante?
earlier she said she had to step away, so I don't know if she made it up.
Oh, okay. LaShante?
Yes.
Dr. Walker?
Yes.
Risha?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Stephanie?
Yes.
Renelle?
Yes.
And Cheryl?
Yes.
And Lynn, is she still stepped away? Okay. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Right, and Tanisha, can I pass the baton to you for the next item?
Yes. And thank you, Ellen. Can everyone hear me? My internet is kind of sketchy.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. So our next item up on agenda, item 7, is to discuss the Rjob's progress to date and our plans for our work for 2022. And I think some of this arose because I know there are questions in the community. It's like, what is the progress of the Rjob? Like, what have we been able to move or accomplish? But then also myself and our chair, Ellen, I don't know why I was going to call you Miss McDonald. Ellen, we're just kind of talking about that. It would feel more appropriate if we actually set annual goals for our work, making sure that we're like actually on a track. And so I'm going to pass this off to Christopher.
Yeah, thank you. And, just by the way, everyone, hi, again, my name is Chris. I'm Christopher, like on print, but you don't have to say that. Sounds formal. All of you do it now. I don't know when that started. I feel like I was Chris for years, and now I'm Christopher in every meeting, but you don't have to say all that.
Well, I will pass it off to Christopher, affectionately known to us all as Chris.
Something like that. Thank you. So before we jump into this, really quick, I would just say on the last item, we probably have enough time to potentially put some language in the presentation for the forum, right? So if folks are looking at data and they want to be involved in some way, that could be a good way to potentially, at least let folks know that there's an opportunity potentially, hopefully coming available toward the end of the month or sometime shortly after for them to be involved. So I'll be looking to do that, either using language that already exists in the documents that were shared, or if there's something else that we should be using, although gotta turn it around really fast. So with this, basically what I'm hoping to do is sort of have a discussion here about where we have been. And I know based on conversations that we've had, some of this is probably going to remind you all, right? Like I've had conversations with folks who are like, well, what did that pass, or did that yeah, there are things. I think a theme that you'll see is that there are a number of things, right, regardless of the fact that we know that the issues that we're here to address still will impact the community, and that's still urgent, right? That still means people's lives being impacted every day, right? And so from that standpoint, when we're talking about the work that we're doing, despite the fact that we are trying to access the proper channels and do things the right way, and that things have time frames, and that we need other, external partners involved, and those things take time, we still want to feel like we're actually moving somewhere, right? We want to feel like we have some momentum and some forward progress. And I would say that you guys do have some, probably not as much as any of us would want, but you have done things. And part of the conversation from here becomes, as a couple of you have alluded to already, where do these things go, right? There are a number of things that this body has voted to do or to approve or to send to the next level. And so some of the question is sort of, how do we make sure that the feedback loop is closed so that you all have the opportunity to have a direct dialogue or forum with PPC or the board directly to say, these are sort of the things that we've been working on, these are the things that we feel strongly about, here was the context, here were any supporting documents or materials that we've had up to this point, and we would love to know what can be done from here, or what questions you have for us, or at least to bring this to your attention so that you can determine what the next best steps are. So I think that's a big part of it. But in addition to that, just wanting to go through some of the things that you all have done as far as actions that this group has voted to push forward, as well as some of the things that are currently in the works as we speak. It's not an exhaustive list because, again, I am hoping to have a dialogue. I don't want to simply present this to you. This is your group, right? It's not even mine. It's your group, and it always has been. So the work that you all have done and the work that you all have contributed, I would love for you all to be able to speak directly to some of that as we kind of roll out what the plan should be. And I think Tamisha hit the nail right on the head when she said we need to develop a practice of setting some yearly goals, right? Because we have recommendations that are going to take quite some time to get through, right? They're big. Make recommendations for diversion to be more equitably utilized for youth and adult populations. That's not something you will do tomorrow, right? That's something that's going to take a while. And so there are a number of recommendations along that line that we have to work on. And so definitely it makes sense to each year think about what we think we can actually accomplish, what we think we can actually achieve, choose one or two things, focus on those, get those done, and then for the next year, move things forward. And I completely support that. I imagine some of that discussion will take place in each subcommittee. And we'll be looking forward to having those discussions and hearing what you all think and where you believe that the work should head next. So without further ado, I will jump into my screen share, if that's all right, and just go down to sort of the recap that I developed that, again, probably leaves some things off, but I did my best to kind of go through a lot of agendas, even some video to see what we voted on, or what you guys voted on, rather, what this group has accomplished up to this point. Okay, so I'll start this by saying you will notice that the actions recap starts in 2020. Obviously, this group, in terms of my interaction with you all, that started in 2019. But when we started in 2019, number one, you guys were ratifying bylaws, doing logistical stuff like setting up your subcommittees, and then for multiple quarters, finalizing a work plan, right? And then there was COVID, right? So that's why, I mean, those are things that happened, things that you did, things that you accomplished or voted on that are not listed here because, they're not necessarily the most substantive, I think, as far as the energy that sort of led to this agenda item. So we start with the approved joint statement on racial equity in light of COVID and its impact on people who are incarcerated. And what I attempted to do, wherever there was a document that folks voted on or made language for, is attach them to this document. Even the diversion definition, which I think I accidentally put in the place of the report, right? Because we didn't have a report from diversion, but really that's included because, I wanted to make sure folks were able to reference things that language that you guys voted on. Some of that language got amended during the vote. And so bringing it back with the amended language in it for you to see it. So that's why the diversion definition is there. The approved joint statement is toward the bottom of your agenda packet. You guys voted so in May, you all had a really active quarterly meeting, right? There were a number of things that you all voted on, one of those being strongly recommending the endorsement of the creation of the Miles Hall Non-Police Response Unit, right? Another one being, like Jeff alluded to before, requesting initial funding for TA to develop that community capacity fund, right? So folks were, doing a lot of work in the CEF about what a community capacity fund could look like, had some input from folks who have done it and sort of, coalesced around the idea of having a two-phase hybrid, meaning that introductorily folks would get a small sum of money potentially, and then CBOs that are willing to do a lot more, intensive sort of work in programming and education would get funded, to a larger amount, or at least that's an example that we discussed at length in the CEF. And so recognizing that, this is something that folks wanted to move, and knowing that we couldn't necessarily develop that or didn't have the expertise for that, saying, let's reach out to TA providers who have expertise and experience with developing programs like this, right? To set this up and to tell us what it should look like and to help administer that program, right, as it goes forward. And then the last thing in May is requesting accommodation, and I don't see him, but I'm gonna ask Melvin not to roll his eyes because I know he's said how he feels about this. I don't need accommodation. We're just trying to do what we're supposed to do, and I appreciate that. But I think the data subcommittee, as well as the whole RJLB, just appreciates the fact that, and I've said this several times, not easy for the data subcommittee, for the probation department to provide the information. You guys suffer a lot of the similar sort of issues that we've heard about, right, from other agencies as to why we don't, get as much data as regularly from them. But you make it work you grit your teeth when we ask you new questions and you find a way to bring it, and we just appreciate that and wanted to publicly say, we acknowledge that this is not easy work, but that you are willing to do it and to work with us in the name of transparency and just, sort of everything that this body stands for, right? So those were all in May, right? And then in August, as we've talked about, right, there was the issue of the Sheriff's Oversight Board, basically that recommendation being brought back to the Board of Supervisors for review in light of new legislation. After that, the most recent sort of actions or votes that you all have taken were in terms of approving the last iteration of membership changes, which were seat vacancies, right? And updating the subcommittee roster so that, like Jeff alluded to, we address some of those quorum issues with folks who weren't able to show up or who were no longer going to participate, as well as a few bylaws changes, right, allowing for meeting discussion to continue if quorum, is broken, and carrying over action items to the end of the meeting. Just those are sort of some of the things that you guys have done to be able to keep momentum going, even when attendance is lacking, and certainly, in the event that while we're waiting to fill those seats, right, these things become an issue. So those are a list of some of the things that you guys have all voted to do that need further action from the Board of Supervisors at some point in order to sort of, be activated or be enacted in some way. And I will pause here just in case I've left anything off that anyone else remembers or that they think is missing, or if anybody has any questions about any of these things. Not seeing any questions, so hopefully I'm not missing anyone. And so this part is sort of the activities, right? All of these things didn't necessarily result in a vote or an approval or a motion or something like that, or at least not yet. They're broken down by subcommittee because that makes a lot more sense, right? You're in the subcommittees more often. So just some of the things, and I would invite subcommittee chairs or anyone else to speak up again, because this is sort of highlights of what we've done, and certainly not every itemized, action step that each group has taken or attempted in the last couple of years, but just wanted to hit some of the highlights for you. So in terms of community engagement and funding, developed language for the community capacity fund. So above, you see that they were asking for technical assistance with the development of the fund. But the CEF also has developed language that I don't believe we have voted on at the full body level yet around what the community capacity fund is and who it's for, right? So just making sure to spell out like what the fund is attempting to do, who should be eligible for it, and trying to make sure that it's clear that whether a group is a CBO is well established, or if it's not so well established and not so used to participating in such endeavors, we still want those folks to participate and still want to be able to help to develop their capacity, right? The point of a capacity fund is not just to help groups who have already been well established and have quite a bit of capacity, but to help smaller organizations that could be doing really great work to get off the ground and to sustain a capacity that really allows for some good programming and intervention and services for the community as well. The CEF held a community listening session back in 2020, I think shortly after we reconvened. That was really, I think, just to hear from community members at large at a time of, a lot of unrest, right? In the wake of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and so many others, right? There was a lot to talk about. And so wanting to create a space you know, even in a body like this, for community to show up and to hear from them about, you know, whatever it was that they wanted to talk about regarding the local community in the national context of what was going on. Great lessons learned from that, including number one, that we did that as a public comment section in a body meeting. Probably not the best idea, not necessarily always the most accessible space, which is why the new listening session being co-sponsored by the data subcommittee is after dark, and is probably going to be agendized as a special body meeting, but there won't be an agenda for the body to get done, so that we're trying to, you know, sort of do public comment for an hour and then take care of body business, right? So, and then I say there that they're co-hosting obviously the upcoming data forum, right? So those are some of the things the CEF has been working on. And Jeff or others, I would invite you to speak to anything that I've left off so far in terms of highlights that you would make.
Thanks, Chris. I think you've captured a lot of what we've done. Maybe just about the community capacity fund, I would note that, you know, there was approval for the technical assistance, but also in there embedded was saying the creation of, or the development of, a two-phase hybrid model. So that was part of the content, was vetted by the full RJOB, still to be developed, but at least in terms of what it would look like and what it would be, that was endorsed through the technical assistance vote. And then maybe the only other major campaign, which you know, and those have been at the CEF meetings, is our Youth Advisory Council campaign. And at this point, it's definitely still in its beginnings, but we've, I think it's meaningful, educated ourselves on what some of the other spaces have been, other models have been, and have had that as a continuing development item. And there was also participation with at least one, and I think we did have 2 sessions with youth leaders in terms of concept. How do we move this forward in terms of our development? So I think that's also been an important area for us. But apart from that, there wasn't anything more I would add. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. And on that note, we will be looking to resume those conversations soon. That's going to require getting with Stephanie about how best to do that and who best to approach, realizing that Stephanie is no longer a member of the subcommittee, that we had to fix that kind of hiccup in the roster, but she has expressed willingness and interest in continuing to support those efforts by at least, I think, sort of getting us in contact with some of the folks that we were engaging with before, and trying to map out a plan for how best to begin sort of recruiting and doing the work around building that advisory council. And so next is diversion. Identified existing diversion programs and services, which is something that took quite a long time for us to do. In fact, sort of looking at, I think, some county information and documents, and recognizing that a lot of it needed to be updated, that some of the programs that were listed did not exist, you know, and that others were temporarily suspended, or others were yet to sort of come online. And eventually, right after a lot of work, getting to the point with diversion that we could have folks from those programs actually come to diversion meetings to talk about how those programs operate, what the eligibility criteria is, you know, what the success rates have been, sort of who is, what trends they see in terms of who's utilizing them or who's eligible for them, and any sort of gaps or barriers to entry as far as those programs and services. As you've heard already, we're currently working on eligibility criteria to be more equitable and inclusive in terms of who is, you know, eligible for diversion, who's using it. The diversion subcommittee has also identified transitional age youth as an area of focus in terms of county diversion, or otherwise as a current gap, right, in diversion program offerings. And I would invite anyone from that subcommittee who has anything to add to do so. I don't think Stephanie, I think Stephanie had to jump off a little bit earlier, so she may not be here to speak up. But if there's, you know, anything missing from that or anything that anyone wants to mention, I would welcome those comments now. Okay, I don't see any, so I will move forward to data. So again, a big accomplishment, right? Something that I really am proud of the group for, receiving and sharing probation, County Office of Ed and Sheriff's data, right? This was something that I think when we got started didn't seem, I think it seemed eventually likely. I don't know that I thought it would all happen, you know, in the way that it did, right? With relative quickness, certainly not relative ease, but with relative speed, right? Able to bring at least those sort of pieces of the overall puzzle to this body on a quarterly basis, right? So remember, you guys, to check your agendas, your data subcommittee agendas once a quarter. That information is going to be there, and maybe, you know, a lot of times, I guess, in the subcommittee report for the quarterly meeting agenda as well. Supporting, promoting the county race ethnicity data website. So there is a website that's definitely a slide that we already have for the community data forum, right? To make sure that people know this is where you can go and find this information. I think one of the things that we just discussed briefly in the previous data meeting is hopefully getting all of the information that we get every quarter up on that website as well, as soon as that becomes possible. And then, you know, that could drive, as we've mentioned, wanting to do multiple community data forums or community sessions, that could drive the next date, right? Is when that data, you know, in terms of all of the breakdowns that you saw earlier in this very meeting, when those are up on the website, those could be a good, you know, a good place to sort of resume the conversation with community about, here's what we know, here's what the picture looks like, what questions do we have from here. And as you all know, supporting and making data requests written, as well as, I put via Zoom because I wanted to say in person, but we all know it's not really in person, right? But folks have made, as we talked about, written requests, as well as gone to meetings and presented, and that's all been supported by the data subcommittee. So that's a lot of the thing that I see that I didn't put here, that Becky would probably jump in to say if I didn't, is all of this that you just heard about basically providing training for law enforcement around, youth development and youth interactions. And so that was driven by the data subcommittee, right? Coming to the realization that there's not much, if any, training right now for local law enforcement around that specific issue, and that could have a huge impact on the numbers that we see in the youth system. And so, you know, based on that information, even though it may have looked a little, you know, fuzzy in terms of it coming out of the data subcommittee, saying, no, we recognize that this is an issue that's not being addressed, and we support, you know, moving forward with it. And so, you know, kudos to them for just a lot of work, I think, particularly within the last year, to get to where we are today. And Cheryl, I see your hand.
Is the training you're talking about, is it the presentations? Because that's what I was getting to. That's what I thought was missing.
The presentation, when you say, can you say more about
the presentations to like law enforcement and those groups? That's what I saw was missing.
Right. So that okay. So no, that's exactly what I mean by supporting making data requests written as well as via Zoom to local county agencies and organizations. So like police chiefs.
Yeah, that's not real clear, Christopher.
Understood.
It's not real clear.
Understood. That's why you're here, right? To ask the
question.
Get the answer. I was just trying
to. I think it should be kind of clear that that's what that means. That giving those presentations to those organizations was, because I think that was kind of big, right?
It was very big. I was trying to be general because sometimes it was a direct agency, and then sometimes it was a larger group like a Police Chiefs Association or Mayor's Conference that's not talking to one specific agency, but a bunch of different things and trying to find the wording for that. But yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to refer to, right? That was big, that requests were made on record. Some of them were or may be in the future followed up by written requests as well. But I think that's huge in terms of, getting where we need to go, knowing that we want to make data informed decisions in this group. Which means that we need some data to work with. And I've thrown in something I thought Becky might say, but certainly want to invite Becky or anyone else from the data subcommittee to speak to any activities that we left off or that they want to discuss further. Okay, doesn't look like I see anything, so I'm gonna stop this share. Because what we want to do now is sort of talk about a couple of things. Number one, so I mentioned earlier, this sort of feedback loop, issue to make sure that the things that you guys decide on or that you vote on or that you approve, that they actually move to the next level. And I think we should be trying to make sure that you guys have a chance, if at all possible, to speak directly to those things, rather than for just some language to go up, maybe without context, maybe without someone being able to sort of speak to, what all has gone into it. So I think that's definitely a point of conversation or discussion that we might want to address. And I can tell you, at least on my end, as Patrice has mentioned, next PPC meetings, February 28th, we'll be presenting on, like she said, all things RJOB. And that's one of the things that I would be, requesting. I don't know what's going to come of the request. I can't make anyone do anything, but I would certainly be lifting, as we do every year with these sort of, progress reports of the RJOB and sort of making recommendations or, sharing observations and things that I see in places where we need support. I'd be asking, that you all have at least twice a year a space to sort of have these direct conversations, if that's at all possible. I don't know what that would take logistically and calendar wise and such, but it's just it's at least a place to start the conversation to say, when things come out of this group, where do they go and how do we streamline that process and make it, as accessible and direct as possible. And so definitely want to hear any thoughts or feedback on that. And if there is none, then we can get into sort of thinking about what goals or what priorities we may want to highlight for this year. And again, some of that conversation will happen at the subcommittee level because you're in subcommittees most of the time, and that's where a lot of the work is taking place. So that's fine, but I think this is a great place to begin to think about what we need to prioritize, what we think we can accomplish this year, and sort of spelling out, again, one or two of those things. Certainly, if you accomplish those one or two things, we can move on to more, but, just sort of trying to take a digestible approach to the workload that we're going to create on ourselves and making sure that we execute on those things.
Thank you, Chris. I'm wondering, is I I know that this is, I think like part of it is like, there's a lot that we got done, and thank you for like highlighting that, because sometimes it could feel like nothing's getting done when there are things happening. And I think that was kind of the point of this presentation, but also to talk about like, well, what are the priorities for this year? And I understand you saying like some of that is going to come out of the subcommittees. I think some of the concern that was raised up is like, you know, the proposal for new work when there's outstanding work to kind of move forward. And like, you know, what are the goals this year? Is it to move things that we know have not been moved, or do we have additional goals? And so if we felt like we had enough time in this meeting to have that conversation or not, I'm not all that sure, but I also wanted to open it up for public comment if that was appropriate, and if you were done with the presentation, Chris.
Yep.
Is there any public comment?
Tamisha, I have a few things to offer, but I also wanted to respect the membership and if possible, allow for them to react or respond, and then I'm happy to share afterwards.
Oh, okay. I mean, I didn't know if I was out of order or not. I guess I was trying to allow the public to comment before the committee deliberated, but we can go either way. What is the preference of the group?
I say it's up to you, Tamisha.
I think I would like to allow for public comment before the committee offered input. And if there is no public comment, then we can go straight to the committee to discuss. Where I see a thumbs up from Cheryl, so I guess that means we can go to public comment. So we'll go to Patrice, who is the only person I see with their hand up right now.
Okay, thank you. A couple of things that came to mind as I was also thinking through what's the best way to organize the work for the body going forward. I think, and again, kudos to Chris for compiling not only the actions that have taken place over the course of the year, but then also the activities that were ongoing. And I also want to commend the entire body and the subcommittee members, because there's a lot of deliberation that takes place. There's a lot of thinking that's happening. You know, there's thought partnership and really thoughtful conversations that are happening. And so I hope that that is seen and valued just as much as the actions or work that is produced that comes from those conversations. So I do want to uplift that. But I think it would be helpful if in the listing of the actions and or activities, those are aligned with, or at least tagged by the actual recommendation that you are advancing. Because I would only assume that as members of the public are trying to understand the direction that this body is trying to go, knowing that the charge is to really steer and implement the various recommendations that were approved by the board. I think that would be a really great way to draw that alignment there. And then also you have various work plans that were shaped and created years prior. And it might be worth it for the committees to review that to see, from the work that has been done over the course of the year against the work plan that was developed. Were you able to make some inroads there, or was there a shift? Not in making that shift, not good or bad, but does that mean that we're in a different context that this committee might want to focus on other things? So just worth sort of reviewing what has actually been done against what was actually planned, to then start identifying what should be the priorities going forward, and also still under the big umbrella of advancing the recommendations that are currently approved. I'm going to put in the chat the link to the website that has the listing of the work plan. So for some of you who have not had a chance to look over it in a while, they are there. I think these were created back in 2020. So it might be a good refresher to go back. And we approach this we have the similar approach with our community advisory board to the CCP, where they do something similar. The various subcommittees are looking at their work plans, not only over the course of the year to make sure that they're on track, but then later refining them if in fact a lot of that work is still really pertinent for that body to then roll over to the next year. So those are just some pointers I want to share in order to help guide the body and how it should shape its work going forward.
Thank you, Patrice, for those comments. And I'm not sure if we respond directly to public comments in this meeting as far as etiquette goes, but thank you for those points. Is there any other public comment before we move on to the body to discuss? Seeing none, moving this discussion back to the oversight body for discussion. Is there any comments, input, suggestions, ideas from members? Jeff?
Thanks, Tamisha. I am thinking about the upcoming data event, and maybe there are going to be other spaces where we can continue to have our goals, our work informed by community response. We've of course had the internal component of these meetings and the opportunity for public comment, but sort of in addition to the work that is already reflected as we're just talking about our goals moving forward. That's another opportunity that comes. But in addition to that, I was resonating with me, Patrice, what you were saying about seeing how we can try to incorporate the work plans, which are pretty complicated, maybe the way that they're presented, but I think it's sort of necessary. We did put time into it. So if there's a way to have it track that as well as the recommendations and kind of have that explicit, I think that's those are good points.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other comments from this body? Anyone want to weigh in around or reflect on what we've been able to accomplish, potential goals for this year, and or some of what we heard around aligning with the original work plan and recommendations of the body that was brought up during public comment? Any recommendations on how to move this conversation forward, maybe to a later meeting?
So one thing I think we could do that I've been sort of alluding to, this goes for everybody, I guess, in February, except CEF, because that agenda is already set. We're not going to do that to Nicole, but we can definitely revisit the work plan, maybe even bring, the slides if they're necessary into the conversation, just put it on each agenda for the subcommittees. So that would be diversion and data, and then the following month, the CEF subcommittee to really look at that and say, what do we want to prioritize here, for this year? Like, what do we think we can accomplish, and sort of spell that out. That can just be something that is at least a part of the agenda for every subcommittee. to really get into the weeds of that and hear from folks who are directly going to be involved in that work in the spaces that they engage with it in. Just a thought. Doesn't have to be the only thought or the best one, just, you know, something worth thinking about.
Thank you for that recommendation, Chris. Is there I think it's a good recommendation. Is there a consensus? I don't think we need to vote on this. This was a discussion, but I also don't want to pass up the opportunity to give anybody else a chance to weigh in. Look like we have some thumbs ups going on. Looks like people appreciate your recommendation, Chris, and that we can move forward with that avenue. And
Tamisha, I'm sorry, just for a point of clarification, for all of the next subcommittee meetings, with the exception of community engagement, we will have an agenda item to review the committee's work plan. Did I get that right for their next one? Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yes, I think so. Was I supposed to open it back up for public comment, or did I miss that part? Well, I guess if there's no further discussion on this item from the subcommittee or individuals from the public, we can adjourn.
And though it hasn't been set just yet on the agenda, it says the next meeting will be TBD, but Nicole did put in the chat earlier that the next one would be May 4th, 5th. Trying to scroll back up to the chat. So we will make sure to get that out to everyone. But May 5th at 1 p.m.
Thank you. Thank you. All righty. Hearing nothing else, we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody. You get some time back in your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.